Alright, welcome to the first ever episode of this new kind of video that I'm doing. I haven't really made up my mind on what to call it yet. I think for now I'm going to call it what I've been watching. That's just the first name that comes to mind. But basically this is a section where I'm going to talk new releases, review requests, and just generally do brief and spoiler-free reviews for movies that I've watched recently that are interesting to me. And yeah, this is where I'm going to be doing my shorter content now, is in this form. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. No need to belabor the point. I'll just jump into the first movie that I want to talk about today, which is The Monkey. This is the latest film from director Osgood Perkins, who, if you've been following horror closely, is a name that you should definitely be familiar with, because last year he made the movie Longlegs, which made a massive impact on the horror world. And it definitely started a lot of conversations, because there were a lot of people who really loved it, really thought that it was like one of the best movies of the year. And then there were a lot of other people like myself who were a little more reserved on it, had more issues. But yeah, Osgood Perkins definitely seems to be a name who is going to be here to stay in the forefront of modern horror. And going into this movie, I was definitely very curious and expectant. I've been saying since I saw Longlegs that I think Osgood Perkins has at least one really great movie in him, and we're gonna see that one of these days, I predict. But so far, with his first three films, I didn't really feel like we saw that, because he started out with The Blackcoat's Daughter, which was a real head-scratcher of a movie to me, not one that I enjoyed all that much. And then he did Gretel and Hansel, which obviously is a spin on the Hansel and Gretel myth. And that movie I still haven't finished. I'll have to get around to finishing that one of these days, but from like the half of the movie that I saw, it looked very much to have the same sort of issues that I've been having with Oz Perkins films, where it has very beautiful cinematography, great production design and whatnot, a lot of style and visual style especially, but the story was severely lacking. And that was kind of the same issue I had with Longlegs, where I felt like it was really great with just the visual atmosphere, but the story, the mystery story at the core of the movie just didn't really play out in a way that was all that interesting to me. And so, yeah, I went into The Monkey really with high hopes, expecting that maybe this one might be Oz Perkins' masterpiece. And unfortunately, I have to report that this did not turn out to be that. The first 2/3 of the movie are very solid. It has this sort of tone, this sort of approach that reminds me of writers like Roald Dahl or Lemony Snicket, where it kind of has that like dark humor, and it plays on like the humor of childhood and whatnot, especially because the movie begins with a segment where the characters are kids. But even once the characters are adults, for the first like 2/3 of the movie, I think it's very solid. It's very stylish. It's very, gory and messed up, but there's also some good humor. I generally was really enjoying the movie. But then there is a twist, a plot twist that happens that completely, in my opinion, just derailed the movie and caused a lot of major issues, where suddenly character motivations are just bad. Like the character motivations become really terrible, and just the places that the plot goes after that plot twist are really unfortunate. And it just, the ending of the movie ended up being a bit of a disappointment to me. Overall, not a bad movie. I enjoyed it more than I disliked it, but there's still a lot of complaints that I have with it, and with the places that it goes towards the end. So yeah, in my opinion, it's a 6 out of 10. Next movie I want to talk about is this film called Pandorum. This is one that my friend was like highly recommending to me, and we watched it together, which was a fun experience. Overall, I didn't find this to be a very good movie, unfortunately. This one, it did kind of intrigue me because a while back I saw a video talking about cosmic horror, which is a genre of horror that I am especially interested in and that I always find really cool. And I heard that this movie was a cosmic horror film and that it did that well. And so I've been kind of curious about it for a while, and my friend just kind of gave me the push I needed to finally watch it. But I gotta say, in the cosmic horror department, it ended up being a bit of a disappointment. There were definitely some interesting concepts, some like psychological or cosmic horror concepts that they sort of include, but I felt like they didn't really lean into those elements enough, and they leaned far too much into the action elements, where you can tell the filmmakers were much more interested in crafting these, chase scenes and fight scenes and whatnot than they were in actually, like, exploring the horror of the void of space, or the kind of things that I would be more interested in seeing a movie for. The character work is really bad. I mean, the characters, with one exception, are all extremely thin. I mean, you've got the main character who's just this kind of generic white dude who, the only real character development he's given is just these very cliche flashbacks where you're seeing this kind of generically attractive wife character who he left behind, but super uninteresting stuff. And then you've got this character who I'm calling Lara Croft from Temu, who is just this very generic female character who is showing way too much cleavage given the situation, and generally has just about no real character development. And then there's this, I guess, like Native American dude who shows up who doesn't even speak English, and so his entire role in the movie is just to basically be the strong dude who does the heavy lifting for the white people, and also just be incomprehensible. We can't even understand what he's saying, and so, yeah, he has really no character. The only character that they really give any real development to is Dennis Quaid's character, who does have some interesting revelations come to light about his backstory and whatnot, but that stuff all comes very close to the end, and for most of the movie, I just don't feel like we got to really see his character develop. We didn't really get that much screen time with him because he's mostly just kind of, sitting off in the cockpit doing nothing really. And so even his character was a disappointment with what they did with it. I think the main appeal of this movie, probably the biggest compliment I have for it, is just the general atmosphericness of the images that are shown on screen. I don't think they do nearly enough with it. I don't think they really realized the strength that they had, but there were a few images of just various locations and stuff in this spaceship, this sci-fi environment, that I found to be very evocative and kind of surreal and cool. The cinematography was good, but in a kind of cheap way. For some reason, the lighting in this movie is really bad. Like, I don't understand what it was, but for some reason the lighting was really bad. But even still, I think some of the images looked really good. So the movie had some interesting ideas, some interesting elements, but I feel like they didn't lean enough into the interesting stuff, and they leaned far too much into these just very basic action scenes that didn't really give me all that much. So yeah, that being said, I think this movie is like a strong 3 out of 10. Following that, as I promised, I want to talk about Dracula Untold. This was where Universal wanted to basically make their monsters into an MCU-style universe. And I think they took all the wrong lessons from the MCU, because Dracula Untold is basically a Batman Begins style superhero origin story, and it's not entirely bad. I think there's some interesting elements. I think the central conflict, at least initially, the central conflict that they give this main character of Dracula, or Vlad the Impaler as he is here, is an interesting one, where he's this guy who has to basically take on dark power in order to save his country and the people that he loves. And that's a cool premise, and in the early scenes of the movie, I think they do some interesting things with it, but I think the main issue with this movie is that it's a Dracula movie, and they don't ever go nearly dark enough with this Dracula character. I mean, this dude is supposed to be like the Prince of Darkness. There's one point where he's like, "My name is Dracula, and I am the son of Satan," or something like that. I'm like, bro, no, you're not. Okay, you are not the son. You are not the son of the devil. Okay, you're not that evil. In fact, quite the opposite. He almost plays like a Christ figure almost, where he's this dude who is basically flawless and has to like sacrifice himself for his entire kingdom. And yeah, I don't think they go nearly dark enough with the Dracula character to be interesting, and so he ends up just being this kind of generic anti-hero, not even an anti-hero, really just a superhero by the end. And that's a disappointment coming from a Dracula movie. I do think some of the action scenes, as much as they do kind of abuse CGI and whatever, I think there are some fun, like, action scenes and stuff like that. Some of the low-hanging fruit pleasures of just the kind of stylish visuals. It kind of looks like 300 at times. That stuff is fun. I got some enjoyment out of that. It's nowhere close to as bad as Van Helsing, which I talked about recently. But yeah, overall not a great movie. I'd say it's a strong 4 out of 10. After that, I want to briefly talk about the 2017 Mummy movie, which was the second attempt that Universal made to do this kind of dark universe idea. And frankly, I wouldn't have been too excited to see a universe spun out from Dracula Untold, but thank God they didn't do this Mummy one, because I would have much rather see the Dracula Untold universe than this one. And it's no surprise that they didn't continue with a cinematic universe off of this Mummy movie, because this movie is just straight up bad. Like, it's just bad. There's not even that much more I can say about it than that. I mean, Tom Cruise plays the main character, who is incredibly unlikable in the beginning, and then like towards the midpoint and towards the third act, they start trying to tell us that, oh, he's actually a great person inside secretly, and I'm just like, whatever. Like, I so don't care. His character sucks. There's a female character in the movie who sucks. Russell Crowe shows up in the movie. He sucks. Everything sucks about this movie. It's just dumb. There's some attempts at humor that suck. Really, it's just overall such a dull movie. Like, that's the word that describes it better than anything. It's just so dull. It's so boring. It's just bad. It's straight up just a 3 out of 10. And then I also wanted to talk about the movie Fresh, which I saw thanks to Dead Meat recently doing like a kill count video for it. And, you know, I'd been hearing people saying, oh, go see the movie, go in blind, whatever. And I just never got around to it. But when James released that kill count and he started the video by being like, go see it, just go see it already, I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go see it before I watch the kill count. And so I watched it, and I'm definitely glad I did, because this is a pretty interesting movie. And I think it falls very much into this category that I've been kind of noticing and that I've been talking about in... I recently talked about it in the companion review, which is that there's this new breed of these twisty horror thrillers that are kind of becoming the thing right now. And Fresh very much is an example of that. It very much fits into that same category with movies like Barbarian and Strange Darling and Companion. And it's very much an addition to that genre. And I gotta say, with this movie, what finally hit me is that the thing that ties all these movies together is that they all seem to deal with, like, male-female power dynamics, dating dynamics, stuff like that. And I think that is, I guess, something in the culture right now. That's something that the arts have to speak to right now. As far as what sets this movie apart, I think the main thing to say about it is just how tense it is. Like, it had this ability to make my heart race in a way that most movies just can't do. I do think it falters a lot towards the end. There is an absolute flurry of very dumb character decisions toward the end where I'm just going, no, don't do that. Like, no, oh, no. And, I'll let you find out how things turn out. But yeah, some of the character decisions were a little stupid, but nevertheless, this movie overall is pretty solid, pretty entertaining. It's a roller coaster ride with the twists and turns it takes, so I definitely recommend it. In my opinion, it's like a strong 6 out of 10. And then finally, we'll go back in time and talk about something significantly less modern, which is The Wizard of Oz, a classic movie that I've been hearing for the longest time that, like, oh, it's such a classic. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. You got to see it. And I had a very negative experience with the movie as a kid where I expected it to be like, I expected the lion to be an actual, CGI lion that looked like a lion. And I expected the Tin Man to be a realistic Tin Man. And so when I was like 10 years old or whatever, I saw the movie and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I did not get what it was at all. And so I always just thought, like, what is the merit in this movie? But I finally decided to go back to it, check it out again. And I gotta say, it is definitely, I see now why it is considered such a classic. I mean, just the world of this movie is so unlike anything I've seen in any other movie. It is so obviously fake. Like, the trees are obviously not real trees, and the lion is obviously not a real lion. And yet, I don't know, there's something so, like, just surreal about it all. It feels like an acid trip, and I really got into that this time watching it. I really could get behind that vibe. And it's really like a beautiful movie. It looks amazing, both in the black and white scenes and in the Technicolor scenes. I found it overall to be very charming, very touching. There was one sequence that I really did not like, which was too close to the beginning, where she's in the Munchkin village, and it's a bunch of these little people dancing around going, "We welcome you to the Munchkin village." That scene is so grating and annoying. Like, that scene did take away from my enjoyment of the movie overall. I gotta say that scene was bad. But with that exception, with that part as the one exception, I think overall this movie was quite great. And I gotta say, the last half hour, it's so simple because it is designed, in theory at least, to be a children's movie, although it really is not for children, but it's designed in theory to be a children's movie. And so everything is presented in a very simplistic manner, and yet the ideas that are there are actually, like, genuinely profound. There were a couple moments where I was like wow, that's actually insightful what they're saying. Behind the silliness of it, they're actually saying something that's insightful about what it means to be human, which, I mean, wild, just absolutely wild. So much more than I bargained for from this silly little 1939 kids movie. So yeah, I highly recommend that movie. If I had to rate it, I guess I'd give it like a strong 9 out of 10. And that'll wrap up this review roundup. I hope you liked it. Give me your comments on what you thought of any of those movies I talked about. And with that said, I will see you in the next review.